Thank you. Let's check some assumptions first before I start. So who would say here that they are interested in design systems? Okay. Who would say they are a bit obsessed with design systems? A bit too obsessed? Okay, we need to talk. Apparently, me too. When I first started working from home, my partner suddenly discovered what I actually do for a living. And one day, after a very long work from home day from my living room, he actually sent me this. So apparently, I'm on a loop on those three words: design system, B2B, and dashboard. And you know what? I realized those three words actually in my presentation today. But then, 10 minutes later, he sent me this. Because I think he's not as excited as I am about design systems. But to be honest, sometimes I'm a bit like him too, because these days, there's so much out there. There's so many expectations. There's kind of like a dogma, a list of things to have or to do in order to have a design system, to kind of be in the cult. And I mean, this is hard because it's a bit like if we now have like a checklist of, dogmas. And as Gina said earlier, this morning actually, checklists, they are here to guide us, but they don't replace a critical thinking. And from the checklist I've seen around is get a cool name. Yeah, hey, yay. Yes? Maybe? Tokens, dedicated team, obviously, design system manager, a whole team. And last but not least, open source it. So our design system has survived 9 years, and we're actually ticking none of these boxes. We actually survived 3 design tool migrations, 3 technical upgrades, lots of things happening in between. And I guess this is what I'm going to talk about today, about how we ended up not doing this checklist, although it was super tempting, but we ended up doing things that work for us. And before doing all this, I'm just going to explain a bit what my company does, because I work in the corporate investment banking division of Societe Generale, as introduced, a French financial group. And so the types of interfaces we typically design are quite complex. So they can be looking like this. So this is a tool really more like used by experts to trade on the market. We also have tools like this, analyzing rates on the market, which is quite useful these days, I guess. But also this kind of website services where our clients, and sometimes we also have public content, can read views, macroeconomics views or views from our analysts. So for example, in the latest podcast, there was one podcast about the link between happiness and carbon emissions, which was quite interesting. But all this to say that our design system needs to support all these use cases. And today, on our platform, we have tools to finance bridges, to analyze risk, to make payments around the world. And our design system really started like this. So 2014, we had maybe 10 services on the platform. And fast forward today, we have 170. So I'm not sure there's enough dots there because I wanted it to be nice visually, but yeah. And a bit like the Marvel universe, we have kind of an extended universe where the design system is also used by other divisions across the group for their own needs. And as I said, I designed this, so I tried to make it kind of aesthetically pleasing, but the reality is not like that. It was more chaos and pain, and maybe some of the things will sound familiar, but definitely what we had and what I heard were things like, we're unique, we move too fast. Oh, and I prefer blue, and all users are different. They use internet differently, okay? And so why would I check my work with them? And anyway, who are you? Okay, I think that kind of rings a bell as well. So this is really what I'm gonna try to cover today, how we survived 9 years now. And really the 3 topics I'm gonna cover are adapt for adoption, embed your org's goals, and change along the way. For each topic, I'll try to share some examples of how we've managed to do all this, and also what we learned along the way. Okay, so let's start with adoption. Obviously, that's the thing that we all need to succeed, right, to survive as a design system practitioner. And very often, the first thing that design system teams try to do when they launch their project is to try to find a cool name. It's like number 1 on my list, remember, which we actually did not do intentionally. But obviously, we have to think of why doing those things are interesting or not. And it is true, in a name, well, who says a name? We want to be easy to identify, so there's identity. Also, branding is great, especially if you want to attract talents. And let's be honest, who doesn't like swag? You have cool socks, and I won a bag earlier, so yeah, I'm hoping to get it one day. But as I said, we made a conscious decision not to have a specific name. So our name is just Societe Generale Design System, which is very boring, I agree. But the reason why we decided not to have it is when you have identity, that means you're excluding people. When you have branding, that means you try to distinguish yourself from the rest of the organization, that you're kind of setting yourself apart. And swag, honestly, is great, but this is just an artifact. And what we wanted people to really understand is that a design system, they can't choose whether or not they want this product, because we don't want people to think design system as a product. We want them to understand that when they do a project these days, they don't get to choose the roundness of tabs or whatever, because they're part of a larger ecosystem that everyone needs to be using design systems. So it's more like a practice and a way to work. And in a sense, it's a bit like you don't rebrand your HR or your legal departments, right? But when you do need to hire someone new, you go to them. So when they do need to make a digital product, they need to use the design system. Is that easy normally? But yeah, so we just have a thing that is our design system, and that's just how we work. Again, we use guidelines, we use design assets, we use code, this all is great, but we really wanted projects to understand that this is our common kind of asset, and they have to use it. I think really when we talk to our stakeholders, and when I say stakeholders, it can be higher up, so basically anyone who uses a design system. The biggest mistake I've seen is that we sometimes fail to adapt a conversation to articulate what's in it for them. We are and that is kind of normal, but victim of our own expert mindset. So the angle we take is to think that we think is right, and maybe they just don't care. So I've actually done a little doodle on how we managed to get buy-in 8 years ago, and this is still what we use today. So the doodle goes like this. There's my little characters. Names, I think, have been anonymized, except mine. But yeah, we have project managers, designers, developers, design heads, program heads, business heads. And if I go to a project manager, what he cares about, Paul, is cost. They're always asked to do more with less, budget cuts, many cuts, all the cuts. So yeah, what they care about is this. Designers, well, especially UX designers, what they care about is spending time understanding the problem, working on usability issues, not necessarily knowing which variant of button to use. Developers, I know there's developers in the room. I'm sure you must have fought with your designer about a gap of 10 pixels, but you don't know if it's a margin, a padding, or whatever. So yeah, UI regressions. Nobody likes to receive an email with like 100 UI points to fix. I guess for me, designer scale, as I said, I want things to be consistent across the services. I don't want one person to decide they want pink, I don't know, borders, and then yellow, whatever, on somewhere else. Program heads, they actually also care about consistency, especially when they ask to contact 700 services to update, for example, a logo, which happens in real life, or update a color, and a design system can definitely help with that. And business head, what they care about is client relationship, and this is actually true. Very often, they are conscious of the silos that we have, and not necessarily aware of solutions, but definitely design system, as you know, can help with that as well. I should add, actually, that depending where you are in your adoption cycle, you will probably not target the same people. So, for example, at the beginning, to get funding, the people we talked to were the program managers and the business heads, but then obviously, we also need to convince designers and developers to use it. So, yeah, it's kind of dynamic, but in all cases, whoever you talk to, you have to adapt your messaging. I'm going to give you a more specific example now. It's actually how we actually got buy-in to work 3 months, more than 3 months, I think, on the color systems. So, as I said, our design system's been here for 9 years. And at some point, we introduced, I think in 2019, dark theme. Because we have a lot of data in our interfaces, so obviously people were complaining that they're seeing those things all day. We need dark theme, so we had it even before it became the norm. But by introducing dark theme, we realized that we had a lot of contrast issues because, as you've seen, we sometimes have lots of layers of information, up to 4, 5 levels of hierarchy, which means at some point, gray on gray, it's becoming super hard to read stuff. And obviously, we wanted to fix the issue systematically at the design system level, not at every single project who has an issue. But the thing, again, is how do you justify working on that when we already had some kind of color system? There's always so many things to do, bugs to fix, and everything. And so this is where kind of staying attuned to feedback is really interesting. And sometimes feedback, obviously, nobody's going to reach out to you saying, hey, you have a color problem. Instead, we received something like this from a very upset salesperson who complained that the client couldn't see the price. Please, and the fix please is exactly how he wrote it, by the way. Thank you, Stefan. But this was a foot in the door. He obviously doesn't know the word accessibility. I mean, he just knows that his client cannot see the price on a super big amount trade deal, whatever. So I remember when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is my foot in the door. So I took a screenshot, put it in every single presentation, roadmap, whatever, just to explain that we can't afford to have this issue running around. We want to fix it for him, but for everyone else. And not just for client training tools, but also for people who use services internally or internal products. So essentially, this is how we ended up working on this and how we got buy-in. I don't actually think that I've even mentioned accessibility in my reports because, again, that's not the point. We mentioned the problem, the solutions, up to us. And so what we ended up doing is have this system of what we call adaptive color, where basically using SCSS, we adapt the color of all our elements depending on what they are and on which type of background they are. So for example, here you have the warning orange color, and you could see that basically, and for example, if it's a text size, depends also on the size of the text, just to make sure that we hit all the ratios correctly. The contrast ratios and the criteria correctly. The little magic, and I'm kind of thinking I maybe should have just said it's AI, but it's not. Well, you could say it's AI technically, but we just mapped a color using SCSS. Obviously, that's still a lot of work. But yeah, and I remember this morning, I think, was it Kevin? Yeah, he had a talk about sometimes we just need designers and developers to sit down together, and this is what happened, because we didn't want to have a very big color palette, because again, we already have so much complexity to deal with. We really wanted people to focus on colors as concepts, like warning orange, success green. And so ultimately, we decided that the system will handle all the adaptation, and we don't have to care about it. So this is what's happening in the background. Yeah, quick wrap up on this first topic. So to adapt for adoption, well, don't copy-paste recipes from elsewhere because your organization is different. Maybe you don't have all the context when other people say things, so be careful, about this kind of things that sound very too easy. Focus on what's in it for them every time when you talk to your stakeholders. And don't preach, show the value. Again, I know this is hard because sometimes we're so convinced. We know all the jargon, we know what things are good, but yeah, as I said, I managed to have buy-in on accessibility without even saying the word accessibility. Again, people will understand that some clients can't see prices. If I say accessibility, then I have to explain what it is. If they have time, then I will do it, but sometimes they don't have time. Cool. All right, so moving on to topic number 2, embedding your organization's goal. What I mean by that is, I feel sometimes we are in a little bit in our tech bubble. And don't get me wrong, I love being here today. I love chatting with all of you. But you will have people back home working with us, and we also need to care about them. And to me, this is where, again, it's easy to feel comfortable around people like us. Maybe less with people from sales, from marketing, from legal, because they don't talk exactly like us. They're not interesting. They don't, the coffee machine, they might not have the same topics of interest. But again, for us to be taken seriously, we actually have to adapt. And so every time you interact with them, you have the opportunity to understand what they need and adapt your messaging. And align them with the value of our goal. So what does it mean? So people mentioned buttons. I know we're supposed to have a little design system bingo, but buttons, there you go. Buttons, yes, we have them, but honestly, not a lot of people are excited about buttons. So in our organization, what is, I guess, the more meaty components are pickers. We deal with a lot of data, so we pick a lot of data, whether they are like content category pickers, date pickers. And this is where it gets interesting, because date pickers seems, as you know, easy to do, but they're very hard to do, even more in the financial markets, because you have things like open days for the markets. You have also date formats. So for example, we don't write the dates the same way, depending on countries. So, and I think I really seen that sometimes. We had a date picker configured in the American dates format, so with month first. And then we had, just because the dev team was based, so one dev team was based in the States, one in Europe, and so they had the European format in the same tool. So can you imagine if you are placing a trade, the error that this can make? And this is exactly the rationale that we tell our stakeholders and executives to say this is the reason why we need to invest in the pickers. But when you've done that, you can extend this thinking. How do we pick a client? Do we have to redevelop picking clients all the time in our interfaces? How do you pick an account? So all this to say that when you extend this kind of design system mindset, at the end of the day, and I can tell this after working many, many years in my company on complex B2B topics, B2B, basically I can tell you that 90% of our use cases are basically this. So we have dashboards, I said dashboard earlier, forms, workflows, reports. People need to get the information, take actionable actions, do some business workflows, and get the result in reports. And I guess this is where it gets, I think Gusam mentioned that in his talk just previously, this is where it gets into a bit of a design system backlash. Because if 90% of that is what we do, and everything is componentized or patternized, I don't know if that's correct, but anyway, isn't it sometimes feeling like this? I don't know if anyone knows this movie. Yeah, Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray plays a weatherman, and he's trapped in a loop, and he has to do the same day every day until he gets things right. Well, I've definitely heard things like that. Creativity was also said today. Yeah, what about creativity? I can't practice my art. Can I have a greenfield project? Because, I'm tired of doing dashboards. And honestly, I went through this phase too. It's like, what's the point? I'm always doing dashboards, workflows, B2B, design system. Yeah, and so I call that the 5 stages of grief, but for design system. Let me walk you through that. So, we have first denial. Design system? Sorry, it's not for me. There's too many constraints, my art, my creativity. Then there's anger. Why are you forcing me to use that? This is the death of creativity. We're doomed. Actually, we had people leaving the team just for that because they really didn't want to use. That was a long time ago, but they really didn't want to use the design system. Then we have depression. Oh, but what's the point? I'm just sorry if it hits home. Pushing pixels anyway. But again, you have to understand a lot of UX and product designers, they come from more like visual background, visual design background, and we're kind of taking away the things that got them into this field. So it's a bit like they've been tricked. Again, as it goes in the cycle, then when you reach depression, then you start bargaining. And you're like, all right, I will use your design system, but I'll duplicate it. Which is kind of defeating the purpose, but this has happened as well. And then we suddenly have seen variation of our design system with like slightly different colors, but for no reason. But at the end of that cycle comes acceptance. Oh, but wait, this can be great. For us, I think when I say us, it's like collectively in my design team and company, acceptance was more kind of understanding at some point the reason why we do UX and product design. Again, it's not to have fun with buttons in Figma, it's to solve issues. And design system kind of help us lower the cognitive load of having to remember all those rules, variants, and everything. So we can actually focus on what matters, at least for stakeholders as well, which is focusing on client issues, user issues, and basically iterating until we find a solution. So for me, this is more like trying to articulate having meaningful work, and this is definitely also aligned more with our organization goal. So when I said acceptance and moving into that, this is again where I come back to my dashboard forms, etc., because we then started to realize that we have more than layouts also to document. We have what we call business pattern. I'm going to show you an example just to illustrate all this. And the pattern I'm choosing is called a 4i check. Has anyone heard the word 4i check before? My head's thinking somewhere. Yeah, so a 4i check, I think it's a pattern that is like really used a lot in finance and basically anywhere where you have very sensitive operations. It goes like this. It's a process where basically the task you're doing is so important. I mean, potentially has so much risk that you need another pair of eyes to validate it. So 4 eyes, because 2 pairs. And to do that, at each step, you need to show the risk area of what was created in terms of content. You have to highlight potential errors, especially if they've been raised previously in the chain. And you need to allow the current person to put their own inputs. So visually, it can look something like this. So this is one of our screens where you could see on the left, you have the content. On the right, you have some warnings. And then you have some comments for audit trail. At the bottom, you have the little action button. And it's a bit like if we could take this pattern and poof, I mean, I'm doing some sound effect here, put it in another product that we do. And here again, the layout is different because the content, the data modeling is different, but we have a financial operation. So you have content on the left, timeline and potential error on the right, and at the bottom, decision. And obviously, this is easy for me to show because it's visual. But you could also consider, okay, what goes into a decision? What constitutes a decision? Does it have to be validated by someone in your team, your manager, someone external? So in a sense, this is what we call a business pattern in the team. And we like to say that this is what allows us to think systematically, it's hard to say, across a platform. But really working on those patterns, reusing, curating, evolving patterns, because they've been done for a project, we've been testing them, either doing usability testing or in production, so we had feedback from real usage from the real world. That's really what allows us to amplify what works and kind of build this kind of shared brain. But again, this is a kind of very nerdy way to explain stuff, and I can definitely not use this to imagine my executive people, reusing, curating, evolving, amplifying, they'll be like completely lost. So another way to say that is something more like this. Working on patterns allows us to reduce cost, reduce entropy, and reduce time to market. As my CEO, so Chief Operating Officer, would say, when he saw the study I'm going to show you next, essentially he said, oh, okay, I get it. So it's good for design and it's good for the wallet. Great, just remember the wallet part and I'm happy. So we try to push this a bit further to really try to kind of quantify the impact of what this would bring to the design team and design systems. So we did a study. So it's a bit, text is very small, but I will let you take a picture in case you want to do the STEM study at your company. But basically, I asked a designer to, in his new project, list every pattern he needs to work on and do a little benchmark from all the other products that we've designed, and pick the one that is the most useful, especially if he keeps them at the end after doing all his study. And I also asked him, try to do it like, don't lie, basically. Try to do it with consciousness. And so he said at the end of the day, especially on this, not all projects can be up to 80%, but for this one, basically 80% of the use cases were already designed somewhere on a platform. And the 80% is basically his estimation of usually what it takes to do research, iteration of prototype, specification, and testing. And for projects, they're also reassured to learn that, okay, we are going to be reusing things that work elsewhere. Obviously, it needs to be relevant, but to know that it's been tested and live in production elsewhere is also something reassuring. Okay, so to wrap up on this second topic, to embed your organization goal, well, first you have to align your goals with those of your org, talk the same way, or articulate it the same way at least. Show and tell continuously, because this is how it stays on people's mind. And also assess impacts on non-executive people. If it means that we have to change the definition of some job desks, maybe that's what we have to do. Okay, so to survive 9 years, we also had to change along the way. And this is an interesting one because obviously, between servicing 10 products versus 170, we couldn't do it the same way for those 9 years. But the thing is, the question is, how do you know when it's time to change? I mean, at work, but also in life, I guess. So for us, it's kind of easier because every time we were kind of forced to change. So this is a little collage of all the support requests that Henry made, Henry who works on the design system made, trying to illustrate that he was bombarded from everywhere. Essentially, this is to say, again, that this might be a cue that, okay, we need to change because we reach a point where it's not sustainable anymore. There's someone who's going to talk after me called Amy Hube that I quoted even before knowing she was talking after me. So Amy said something very interesting that by learning how to change design systems, we create design systems that can change. And this is so true. When I look at the governance that we use, again, between 10 products and 170, you can't have the same governance. And that kind of goes along with how the design team grew over the year. So in 2014, it was easy. We could just have all the designers pitching because we were such a small team. We were like 6 maybe or so. But then very quickly, people started to complain. They started to complain that was taking too much time and people were not having time to express their needs. So we decided to change our setup and we kind of move into what we call benevolent dictatorship, where a few elected people will decide for everyone. So then we started to have more velocity again, until guess what? People complain again. So maybe this is a French thing, but complaining people, it's also a good time to realize that you need to change stuff. Because then people will start to say, but I don't feel included anymore. I'm out of the loop. I don't know what's happening. I feel completely withdrawn from design system. And we didn't want that, so we changed again into a decentralized workforce where we would rotate some people to work on the design system. And again, that worked well, and they would do reports to the rest of the team until it didn't work again. Because those people, they also had projects, and essentially, projects are always a priority, so they were feeling frustrated that they couldn't focus on design system work. So, and I guess we're still on this version of the governance. In 2020, we moved again into a new version of the governance, which is a shared design system council, where basically this time we're still rotating members, but there's a clear criteria on what it means to actually be in the council in terms of roles and responsibilities. One criteria is actually not to be a manager. Because design systems started to be used by many teams and entities, and I don't know how many of you work in big organizations. Ownership is important, and the problem with managers is they usually fight for ownership. So this is essentially how I removed myself from design system operations, because I didn't want anyone else in terms of at manager level to be there. Surely you can send council members and contributors, but let the people who do the work actually work on the design system. All this to say that at the end of the day, I think that design systems really are much more like ship of Theseus. So if you remember your philosophy class at school, the ship of Theseus, it's a thought experiment on what it means to change over time. So basically it goes like this. If there's a ship and you change one part at a time, at which point does it become a new ship? Yeah. The link with design system, follow me here, is that design system often really change part by part. We don't need to do a big bang and recreate a design system every time. We just need to learn to change them part by part. A quick example here, and I'm going to finish with those two examples, is how we evolved a picker component. As I said, it's something we use a lot that gets interest from our top executives. And our main picker was developed in 2019. But we had a previous version that we did in another technology. So now in 2019, we used Stencil. Before it was kind of ad hoc, and projects were complaining that it was hard to use. So we decided to change the technology to manage our pickers and basically what we call widgets. And this year, we actually did a spin-off of it because we realized a lot of time we need to, and it's kind of funny to realize that we waited so long to have a currency picker for a bank, it's funny. Because every time they were reconfiguring always the same thing and they needed the flags and everything, so what we ended up doing is a spin-off of the picker that we call now currency picker. And by doing this spin-off, we realized that the picker that we did in 2019 was a bit convoluted in terms of code. It was very hard to fix bugs and maintain it. So the team is currently working at refactoring the picker. So it's going to change again. Ship of Theseus. Huh? And my last example is actually changing even how we evolve our contribution system. As I said, we have a council today. And basically, they're the one who manage this. Every time we have a request from related to the design system, it's either a new component or pattern, a feedback or suggestion, or a bug report. And the council used to basically, and still actually, manage all this to decide whether it's maybe not work needed, maybe someone just needed a link to the documentation. Maybe it's a snowflake. Maybe it's just something we have in one project and we can live with that, and they do it. Maybe we actually need to update it because it's something that will benefit to everyone, like the adaptive color system. Or maybe it's something new, like kind of creating the spin-off of a currency picker. But this actually means that there's a lot of responsibility on the design system council, especially when we work on new component and new pattern. They might not know what is actually needed. So what we've been trying for many, many years to document those patterns. I think Michelle said as well this morning that patterns is hard, is even more work. So we actually need to find a way to involve those people who have the knowledge, so those designers from projects who have knowledge and who are still motivated and not too blasé of design system. And so essentially what we're doing now, and I think this has been working at least for this year, so we might be on the right track here, is we give them the fun part of the work, so doing the research, kind of iterating, and someone from the council was there just to make sure that they cover and maybe they think about all the consequences of what they're pushing, kind of more like the systemic thinking part. And also, potentially also documenting stuff, because at some point someone needs to complete all the states and document them. But yeah, as I said, we changed 4 times the governance, the contribution system changed twice, we changed 3 times design tools, 3 times the technical stack. And this is really something that we know we have to keep doing until we have to change again. And this is again to say that I'm not saying that we won't have a cool name, maybe tokens tomorrow, but every time it has to be aligned with the interest of your org at that moment. So one last thought I'd like to leave you with is actually do what works for you and not necessarily what the community tells you to. Not the dogma. It's not because someone famous said something that you have to do it. Use your critical thinking, as we said earlier. And don't feel bad about it. I mean, sometimes I read stuff and I look at the amazing things that the community does, and I feel a bit ashamed as well that we're not doing it. But again, it really depends on where you are in your journey. Do what works for you to get adoption in your context, like us by not having a cool name, align with your organization goal, like articulating savings patterns with the top executives, and again, as I said, at this very specific moment of your journey, like us when we change governance 4 times. Some of the things that I covered today are also in a Medium blog, so all the people who actually work on those topics try to share their knowledge as well, so you can have a look there. I can see Amy's here, and I'm just going to also say that she has, I think Luke mentioned that after Michelle's talk, an amazing podcast, because again, when we work at system levels, it's also lots of responsibility on what we introduce in the system. So you can, I definitely recommend the podcast and some of the episodes. I learned really a lot from them. And as for me, I'm Morgane Peng. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.